on the smallest lower bound. This is called branching. Branching is when there are several options, which one you are going to take, where are you going to bet and proceed further with your exploration. The clues for the bets are given by the lower bounds. So various lower bounds when you have, you look into them and then bet on one of them and expand in that direction. And what is the bound here? What we will have at any given time is the current best solution, the cost of current best solution, or CBS, current best solution. To begin with, you can take simply one cycle. Let us say 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4. You find whatever is the cost. Suppose the cost is 75. This is the best known solution so far for you. Okay, that is all. Later on, this current best solution is going to be improved. Suppose you find a cheaper route, you will improve with that. And suppose you find still cheaper, you are going to change that. So the current best solution will keep changing as you work through the algorithm. The current best solution is going to be used as follows. Suppose I have L2, L3, L4, L5 found out. My current best solution is 75. Suppose L5 is 50, L4 is 70, L2 is 40, L3 is 100. What can I do now? I can immediately kill L3, right? This is called a bound. Use the current best solution to eliminate or to prune away. What does this information say? This information says among all the solutions that you found, a lower bound for their cost is 100. But I already have one solution whose cost is 75. Why going further here? So this is killed immediately. But I don't know. There may be a better solution over here, there may be a better solution over here, and there could be a better solution over here. I wouldn't know where it is. But all of them are still potential. So the potential nodes are called live nodes. In other words, they are capable of holding the promise for you. So they are called live nodes. So there are dead nodes which are simply killed and pruned away. There are live nodes waiting to be expanded. Okay, which one would you expand? Which one would you apply the branching strategy? Choose the lowest one. Here the lowest happens to be 40. So I am going to expand this, and while expanding I will get the estimates for this. When I get estimates for this, now I have the information that it is going through 1 and 3. So rest of them I will do some study and get the estimation something like 45, 85, 60. So when I get 45, 85 and 60, then what I do is this 85 I kill immediately because my current best is 75. Now already I have two nodes waiting to be expanded. I have discovered one more node to be expanded, and so on. So what I do is all the live nodes I put in a queue. They are all waiting to be expanded, let them wait in a queue. And notice that the way in which I am expanding is, among the people who are waiting, the one with the cheapest one I am choosing to expand. Therefore, what I have to consider next for the expansion is, among the people in the queue, the one which is the cheapest. What is it called? Priority queue. That is all. So what I am going to do is, I am going to maintain a priority queue of live nodes. Each node will have the lower bound estimate with it. Before putting into the queue, I just see whether it is worth expanding at all. And this I am considering vis-a-vis my current best solution. Okay. So what I have done is, in the queue, first I have put 70, and then I have put 50, then I would have put 60, but then priority queue I am going to access accordingly. I am simply giving you the one, and this 45 I expand, and this happens to be 59 and this happens to be 80. So I am going to kill this out. 59 I will expand and this happens to be 60. Okay. Now I am at a leaf and now I have a solution which is better than the current best solution. So my current best solution is now 60 and now 60 is going to be used to eliminate fellows here. So I am going to expand 50 but I am not even going to expand 60. I have already a solution with 60. What is the point in going to a node which lower bound is 60? If you want all the solution, then probably you may want to expand that also. But if you are not interested in all solution but only one solution, by expanding in this node, I may get a solution whose cost is 60 or more. But I already have a solution whose cost is 60. So there is no point in going there and the minimum happens to be 50. So I will expand this one now. So earlier I was working here, but now I will take this node and then I will do the expansion and so on. Okay. Why do we not?
Why do we not put every time into the priority queue? Like when we have 45, 60, 70 and 50, we put everything there and then choose 45. Then we have 59.
No, these are all partial solutions. When I expand, what I do when I expand is,
But you're still at a node.
Huh?
Not a leaf.
they are not a leaf. That's the reason why it is a live node.
Yeah.
It is waiting to be expanded. See, at this stage, when I expanded, these two nodes come into picture. It is not worth considering, I am throwing away. This is worth considering, okay? So I put it in the queue.
Yes.
That's what I have to do, yes.
In that case, we should follow 50.
I have to expand 50, yes, that's right. If it were 59 here, so just to make the life little simpler, I will make it 49. Okay. Yes, if it is 59, I am not going to expand this. I will expand only that 50. At any given time, what I do is I expand and then see what are all the potential live nodes. The useless nodes I kill, potential nodes I put back into the queue, and from the queue I take the cheapest one and then I expand. Right? I keep doing only that. At any given time, I am going to expand only the cheapest live node. The cheapest live node, wherever it is. So I might build the tree here and there, doesn't matter. For everything I have a pointer, because in the queue I have the pointer at which I have last stayed, and when I access that node, I can proceed further from that. There is no problem at all. Implementation wise, it is very cool and simple implementation. Okay. So you have a priority queue of live nodes and you take from that, you expand that, and when you expand it, okay, what you do is you expand it, and then when you get a better solution, now 75 will be upgraded to 60, 60 is crossed and 50 will be done. And through 50, suppose you happen to get something like 59, the current best will be upgraded from 15, and then this node still which is in the queue, this need not be expanded at all. Now earlier I thought I could expand, but now I have a current best solution which is better than that, so it will be eliminated and so on. Okay. So this is how I do this until the queue becomes empty. I will keep doing this. So initially what do? I put the root node in the queue. When there is only one node in the queue, you expand that. When you expand it, compare with the current best solution and put only live nodes in the queue. And among the live nodes, choose the minimum one and expand. Some of them may get instantly killed, some of them become live and they get into the queue. Every time you put in the queue and then look into the queue, choose the smallest one and expand.
A dead node can become live at any time.
Which one?
A dead node can become live at any time.
Never. That is the biggest advantage we have, because I am killing a node only when every possible solution from that is worse than my current best solution. Therefore, there is no need ever for a dead node to be considered again. My current best, when it is, if at all, if it is updated, it is going to be updated with a still cheaper route, and if 70 has eliminated them, 60 is going to anyway eliminate them, and 59 would obviously eliminate them, and so on. Therefore, it becomes cheaper and cheaper as I proceed. Therefore, the nodes once I killed can never or need never be considered again.
What is the basic criteria we are looking when the initial construction of this tree? Is it cost-wise we are looking for, when we are choosing one route, right?
Yeah.
So initial construction is cost-wise, partials cost-wise?
No, initial construction is, see, what I have told you is a generic framework. What are the things that you have to do in the course of execution of the algorithm? To begin with, you start with some solution. It could be a very naive solution, dumbest of all solution, doesn't matter. You don't do any big thinking, just get one solution, and that is your current best solution. So start with current best solution. Then you should be armed with a lower bound computing strategy at any given node. These are the two ingredients you need, because when you are expanding that node, you are going to have 3 new nodes. At each one of them you have to find the lower bound. Therefore, you have to find a lower bounding strategy. And if the lower bounding strategy is very clever, lot of pruning will take place. If it is weak, then you will end up a lot of expansion. Okay?
Success of it depends on this function, right?
Success is depending on only that lower bounding function.
If you choose a wrong function, you might eliminate a subtree which actually contains a best solution.
Oh no, that you will never.
Like, for example, what you have shown there.
Huh.
That one, the estimation is wrong, the one on the right side.
No.
Two subtrees. No,
125 and 100.
125 and 1. No, I am not going to eliminate anything.
No, suppose you use this thing.
Which use what?
Like,
No. See, if I am considering both, if I am expanding this means my current best solution is something like 150. That is why I am keeping these two. Among these two, I am expanding this. But if my current best solution is 115, I will kill this instantly and then I will consider only this.
But then the best solution is there, right? Leftmost one.
Which one?
The left one. There. Same one you should. The policy in the.
No. I am comparing only these two. My current best solution is 115. So obviously this is not the one. It is only a lower bound. It is not a solution to any instance. These are all just lower bounds. I will give one example. I am going to give one example, but before that I want to make the concepts clear. So I will run simply a mock example. Okay? Nothing, no problem, any of this kind. I am simply going to run one code completely with hypothetical numbers. Okay? Suppose current best solution is 75 and I have expanded and I have found out the lower bound, and the lower bounds are 60, 90, 50 and 55. Root I expanded and I found out this. This is the current best solution. Current best solution is this, and so this kills immediately this. I am going to put only in my queue. This is queue. In my queue I am going to take 60, 50, 55. I will put all these things in the queue. Now among this I am going to expand only the smallest one. So I remove from that and I am now expanding. So I am removing this from the queue and I expand this. When I expanded this, I have found out the estimates, and I found the estimates to be 58, 61 and 65. All of them happen to be smaller than 75, so I have to put them here. 55, 58, there is a potential 61 could be one and 65 could also be this. Now I am going to expand among the minimum, which is 55. So this will stay put there, and I am going to expand only 55, and when I expand this, suppose I get 80, 64 and 85, then I am not going to expand this anyway pruned, and only 64 gets into it. And among all these things 60 is the minimum, so now this will get expanded. Sorry, 58 is still there, so not 60, sorry, 58 is there, and this is what will be expanded, okay, assuming that this is leading to 70 and then 73. Okay, and for the time being let me stop at this level, so that assuming that in this level everything is over, 70 is a solution. Therefore 70 is the current best solution. Current best solution is updated with 70, because current best is okay, 73 will anyway go, no, 73 is also a solution. You backtrack and then you see the solution. This is larger than this, therefore you are not going to expand. And among the remaining thing, which one I would expand? 61 I will expand. Suppose while expanding 61 I found out 63 and 66. So 63 is now my current best solution, and 66 will be avoided. And since I have a solution for 63, I don't have to expand this. I don't have to expand this. In other words, I pop up from the root, but I will not expand this. I would not expand this. I have expanded this, and then I have already, I haven't expanded 68. 63, 60 is what I would expand. So when I expand 60, suppose I get 70, 71 and 61, 70 and 71 will go away, 61 I will expand. If it is 62 and 65, 65 I will remove, and 62 I will output as the best solution. Everything is accounted for, and so on. This is how it will work. I haven't actually shown you how I found those things. 60, 61, 70, 72 arbitrarily I kept writing. I haven't told you how that is to be done. And that means you have to get a lower bounding strategy. For any optimization problem, you have to get an estimation of, you should be able to get a characteristic of lying in that subtree and get a lower bound for it. Smarter you are, better will be the pruning effect. Okay, and faster will be the your way to answer. This is such a fundamental problem, and this problem is related to the one which I have already told you on the printer plotter driver. In printer plotter driver routine, what they have to do is that they have to put the pen at one point, the stationery moves, and then the pen moves up and down and goes to various plot and then plots, and then it has to come back to that original position. And what they want to do is that, given a particular diagram and various coordinates of turning, they would like to make minimum movements of stationery as well as a pen, so that by the time the pen finishes drawing the figure, okay, it's not a laser printer, it is a printer plotter, therefore pen has to physically move and then hit it and then generate the picture. Okay, by the time it finishes the task, it has to go to various places and then it has to come back to the initial position. Can it make much less movement, minimize the movement? Why we would like to minimize the movement? It is a mechanical device. If it is an electronic device, the data transfer and movement will be faster at the speed of light, but mechanical devices will take much slower time. So you have to minimize it, and that is the reason why they decided to minimize it, and then they found out an optimal way of movement scheme. But finding that optimal way took 30 hours and 35 hours, and the printing task will be over in 5 minutes or 6 minutes, whether it is efficient or inefficient. But finding which is the best way to printing takes about 1.5 days, right? The job to be finished is only 5 minutes, but to decide which is the best way to finish the job takes 1.5 days is obviously an unacceptable overhead. And that is how before releasing the driver, when they were testing it, they found everything is so unacceptable, and then they didn't even realize that it is a traveling salesperson problem they are stuck with, and the space is so enormous. Okay, it happened in Bell Labs. So Bell Labs has got a algorithm consultant, and he is John Lewis Bentley. JL Bentley is the person who whenever he finds a hot spot in a particular, he makes a thorough analysis of it and makes it efficient and so on. And Bentley has written a series of wonderful articles. You must read Communications of ACM for articles written by Bentley. You can even Google search and then get the articles in Communications of ACM. He gives you the professional experience that he had in various stages of his career, and how the organization felt a difficulty, and how he analyzed the problem, and how he proposed a solution, and how the dramatic improvement has happened. This he narrates. Every article written by him is a real life experience, and mind you, he is a consultant for Bell Labs, which is solving real core problems in computer science and then applications. Okay, so variety of such problems which he has solved, he narrates them in that series of article, very illuminating. And this printer plotter case study which I have told you is the solution was offered by him because he saw immediately that it is a Hamiltonian path problem and there is no efficient solution for it, and those people were trying a brute force method for it, and that is their Waterloo. That's why they just could not complete it in a satisfactory manner at all, even for 20 points, which is understandable. You know why it doesn't even terminate, and they have to switch off and then reboot, because it goes on and on and on. 19 factorial is a very large number. Okay, and if you do a brute force on 19 factorial steps to find out how to move the plotter, and that's the end of your job, and that's it. Okay, not only the job given to the computer, perhaps even your job. Okay, so you don't do that, you don't produce such a software. So he came up with a heuristic, a very clever way of finding the lower bounds, and not only he, for this particular problem, because of its practical importance in various cases, there are 75 different solutions and styles of finding a lower bound. Okay, and there are extensive comparisons for each one of them, because not all cases can be handled by one particular lower bound strategy. You will have some lower bounding strategy, it will work for certain kind of structures, but it will do very poorly for some of them. Having spotted the weakness, they would try to patch it and then work out a slightly different strategy, but that will show some weakness over here. See, basically it is an NP complete problem. It is inherently difficult problem to solve. It is like the air in the cycle tube. If you press here, it goes somewhere else, and if you press there, it comes here back or something like that. So you try to optimize at some point, but at some other place it shows up its bad feature, and you cannot improve this, you cannot make it polynomial. But what you can do is, in your context, for most of the cases, if it behaves well, for the kind of distribution of data that you have, if your random guesses and lower bounding strategy in general prunes lot of nodes, you had the blessing of God. That's all we can say in this context. Okay, so that's the only way we can handle the situation here. That's because the problem is inherently complex. Okay, so whenever you want an exact solution, this is the kind of a crisis you have to go through, and in this, pruning gives you relief, right? But you cannot take crocin and saridone for cancer. That pain is a real pain. Probably you can take for a mild headache and for certain minor ailment. Obviously you cannot do that for. So the pruning is good, it is working well, but it can work well for some well distributed one, for reasonably random distribution, and then it will effectively work. But there are nasty situations which will defy all your pruning strategy and make you sweat and go to all the nodes and then discover that this is useless and so on, and finally only you would get the answer. If that is the case, you are finding the solution only after a long time. You may have a pruning strategy, but it may be ineffective on certain bunch of inputs. If that is the case, pruning doesn't really help. That is it. Okay. But these are all the strategies which are found to be extremely helpful in most of the cases. So whether it is helpful or not is discovered only by extensive experimenting, and then should I abandon this or not? Should I take that kind of a lower bound strategy or this kind of a lower bound strategy? Everything is going to be done based on judgment and extensive test case analysis. Okay. So this is one way. Another way is, well, I don't want an optimal solution, even if it takes a little more time. Okay, if the optimal finish time is 5 seconds, it is okay if I have a solution which takes the system 7 seconds to finish the job. It is fine with me, right? But I should be able to arrive at such a scheme quickly, so that I arrive at that scheme, implement that scheme and finish the job, right? So how do you get that kind of a solution which has a overhead? And that is the topic in approximate algorithms, which we will see later. So in this one, I am now telling you to arrive at the exhaustive, I am telling you the ways and means of arriving at correct solution. The ideal thing is getting the correct solution. But if every which way of getting a correct solution is leading into a trouble, big trouble, abandon the correctness requirement, go for approximate solution. So I am taking you through that evolutionary path because you should first try a very brute force itself works. When it doesn't work, see pruning. When the pruning doesn't work in a direct fashion, branch and bound technique where you have lot more heuristics and more power can be incorporated into your scheme. If none of them works, then attempting to get an exact solution is futile. Be content with an approximate solution, but then don't work on simply mindless heuristics which can be very erratic. Have some kind of a performance guarantee. For traveling salesperson problem, on the printer plotter we have an excellent linear time algorithm which can solve the problem within less than 50% overhead. Okay, and that is what Bentley suggested, and it was incorporated. And then it was simply zipping through. You just press the return key and then the printer plotter starts everything and moves. It is not going through the optimal path. It is taking slightly circuitous route, but still it is perfectly all right for all practical purposes. And in fact, the difference is not even discernible in many of the situations that that was accepted as a working solution. But then he went for an approximate solution. Okay, because even when he tried with heuristic, it worked for certain cases, and for some of the instances it was taking embarrassingly longer time. So he abandoned the idea of getting the optimal route and go for nearly good optimal route, but all that comes with detailed mathematical analysis. Okay, it doesn't come free of cost. However, it is a one-time research done at the boardroom or at the research desk or wherever it is. The code for it will look very simple. Do just this, this and this, and then you will get in less than 50% overhead the solution. As a recommendation can be conveyed to anybody, even a routine programmer, coder can take that idea and implement it. Okay. To discover such a method requires a lot of ingenuity, mathematics and so on. So if you want to be innovative, that is the difficult part here. Because getting an approximate solution is not an easy task. Especially proving the performance guarantee is a very difficult task. Mathematically challenging. Okay? But practice demands it. Right? You cannot simply say, I know it is not going to work, I will simply do it and produce a solution and take it for my implementation. Is not going to work. You do something, but make sure that there is a upper bound on the penalty or the overhead that you incur. The amount of overhead that you incur defines the quality of the approximation of the solution. Okay? So the less the overhead it commits, better will be the result. Okay? So there the challenge is how with the least amount of overhead I get my job done as efficiently as possible, and so on. That's a area of research by itself, and it expands into infinity rather. So the reason is except a handful of problems which you see in probably in a textbook of algorithm, every practical problem that you encounter is inherently extremely difficult to solve. Okay? Most of the problems encountered in practice are very difficult ones, and they all require this kind of pruning, superimposing pruning on that, branch and bound with various techniques. Okay? I thought of giving a actual execution of a branch and bound strategy on the on this one, but that would take another 20 to 25 minutes, which I do not have. We are already nearing this. Therefore, I will skip that case study, and in fact, I would, because I want to talk to you on simulated annealing, and also about the, I want to give you quickly the idea on the local search and so on. I will now go from here to the local search and then the simulated annealing part, rather than working out a numerical example of it. Is what I want to take is, I want to take a Cij matrix, tell you one lower bounding strategy so that you understand how people are coming up with the lower bounding strategy, much like we have seen some pruning strategy and then asked you to discover new pruning strategy. If I tell you one lower bounding strategy, then in all probability you will be able to come up with your own lower bounding strategy. It is not very difficult. When there are 75 different solutions exist, I don't see why you cannot create the 76th solution for it. Okay? It is entirely possible. Whether it is worth or not, you have to experiment it, compare it, and so on, because these are all the things which do not have a mathematical analysis. You have to only compare its performance by practical and simulated studies. That's the only way you can assess the merit. These are all the potential strategies for lower bounds, and they all work in practice very well. But then why there are 75 different strategies? They looked into weakness of some and then come up with some patch and so on, and that's how it has evolved. There is a book on traveling salesperson problem, and that book has got about 35 of the solutions compiled, experimented, all results. That book is available. If any one of you is curious about it, you can take a look at it in one or two of the methods. All the methods are easy for you to follow. Once you know this is exactly what they are doing, then it becomes a lot easier for you to follow any of the methods that are mentioned there. Without knowing this framework, when you try to read it, everything will look very mysterious. You can't even decipher what is that they are trying to do, because they won't draw pictures and they won't draw anything, and they will draw one lower bound function, and then they will say that it is pruning 40% of the nodes and so on, and give one numerical table, and with that you can't connect various conceptual ideas behind the algorithm. So I have explained all of them, and this is sufficient for you to understand now any algorithm that you see based on branch and bound. Okay? Though if time permits, I would like to work out a very simple lower bound strategy and its effect on an example, so that you see in a live fashion how this LXS are eliminating. Okay? That we will see later. Okay, now I switch over to the other one. Can we go to the screen and the
approach to obtaining a heuristic solution to a problem?
Approximate solution is 100% methodical way of solving the problem. It is. Heuristic, that let us clarify the terminology. A heuristic is one for which the performance analysis is known only by empirical data and no mathematical property of that is known. That is called the heuristics. It just occurred to your mind, you feel it is good, you have some empirical analysis done and you made it public. That is it. But the same intuition which you thought is working, mathematically analyzed, and if performance guarantee is also proved. For example, you worked a lot and you have done a lot of case studies, and in that you found out that if it is 10 it doesn't go beyond 15, if it is 20 it doesn't go beyond 30, if it is 40 it doesn't go beyond 60. This, after extensive study, you made an observation. So you may make a conjecture that this heuristic doesn't cost overhead more than 50%. But it may be wrong. Somebody might find some instances in which the overhead could be 70%. In that case, your conjecture falls flat. There is no performance guarantee for that. However, after making this observation, suppose somebody makes a very careful theoretical study of that lower bound properties and connect it, and then after some constant struggle they could show that the overhead never exceed 50%. The heuristic now becomes an approximate algorithm with the quality of overhead less than 50%. That is the difference between heuristics and approximate algorithms, right? One and the same, except that approximate algorithms have performance guarantee, heuristics have got no such performance guarantee. You have only some empirical evidence on their goodness, and it could be misleading, okay, because you cannot check for larger inputs. How will you check this for larger inputs? Traveling salesperson problem, right? So naturally you will tie around with smaller instances. In smaller instances, the sensitivity of the method or the weakness of the method might not get exposed, and that is where the problem comes. But in real life, when you actually work with it, you will get all kinds of data in which when it is put to test, it could go haywire, and that is where you feel miserable. Because what you have concluded through your test and what is happening in real life, there is no match between these two. Your empirical analysis has not given you enough clue on its true characteristic. But once you proved the approximation theoretically, whatever be the instance, the performance guarantee of 50% overhead is always there. Hence, you adapt it, you will never fail. Okay. For traveling salesperson problem, we have heuristic. We have heuristics, we have approximate algorithms, we have all kinds. Among the 75, you have quite a few heuristics and quite a few approximate algorithms. All of them are available. Okay, so now what I will do is I will begin with local search, and what I need is to magnify this so that it is visible. This part alone I want to make it, where do I have that magnifier here? Oh, okay, here down 160%, 200. Is it visible? Yes. The idea is this: the solution space we are now exploring in a systematic way. We are not going to do that, and we are going to have a different strategy here. You start from somewhere, some solution, and explore its neighborhood for a cheaper solution. If you could find a cheaper solution in the neighborhood, go there, and in its neighborhood you find yet another cheaper solution. In this way, when you keep going through a cheaper and cheaper solution, hopefully you will hit on the cheapest possible solution. The hope is due to the fact that we have some kind of a structure, we assume certain nice properties in the solution space and the relation between various solutions and so on. So how do you define the neighborhood of a solution? The neighborhood of a solution is defined by some kind of a proximity relation. Two solutions are very close to each other, and then neighborhood means a kind of a solutions which are very close to the given solution. The closeness can be defined in several ways. Okay, I have to give some examples to illustrate how the closeness can be even seen or visible. Oh, I'm sorry, I think it's how the closeness could be defined and so on. Okay, that requires a simple example to do. Perhaps it is worth knowing. It's a very practical and important one, so I would rather do that even after the break, right? And I will spend 15 minutes on this after the break, and I could have extended this a little flexibly, but unfortunately I have an appointment at 12:30, and that is the reason why I have to wind up this session by 12:15. Okay, when we come back, we would see what can be done. So replace alpha with a neighbor of alpha whose cost is an improvement in comparison with the cost of alpha. So you start from some alpha, any solution, go to its neighbor, okay, and so on. What might happen is this may get stuck in so-called local minima. Okay, suppose if you imagine the solution space in some kind of a geometric form, and if you can imagine a kind of a low, okay, a valley. Then what happens is, you see the neighbor, it is costlier. You see neighbor this side, it is costlier, and okay. However, there could be, the solution could be like this. The real minimum cost could be here. If you are here, you examine all the neighbors and none of the neighbors are cheaper than this. So you thought you got the cheapest solution and then you are stuck there. Okay? But in general, for many of the interesting and well structured ones, it is possible to hit on the global minimum. So in order to hit on the global minimum and not stuck with the local minimum like this, what they can do is, the local search can simultaneously be triggered at several places. Take a random place and let each one of them converge. Let us say in the solution space, a reasonable sample could be something like 15 or 20 if it is not very erratic, right? And if there are 5 low points, 5 different low points, the lowest of them will be hit by one of them. So you start with 25 starting points, look into where it stops and take the overall minimum. Hopefully that will be a better one. So this is called multi-start local search. Instead of starting with a single local search, you can do multi-start local search. Local search algorithms are very simple to implement and extremely efficient. That is because you are not going to do any great analysis here. You start from some solution, from that solution to go to its neighbor you need an algorithm. That is, from one solution to another solution, the transformation process should be very simple. Invariably it will be very simple. The very definition of neighborhood itself will tell you how to go from one solution to another solution. Accordingly, the cost recomputation will not be a major work, it will be a minor tinkering of the adjusting of the cost. So you see whether the tinkering process can lead to a solution that is cheaper than that. If it leads to cheaper one, go there and keep proceeding it. And when you are stuck, in other words, in that process, if you are not able to proceed further, that means you are in a point in which all the neighbors are costlier than this. Therefore, it is a minimal solution, may not be a minimum solution. If you want to have a minimum that is overall smallest, better make local search in several spots in the solution space. This is a generic recommendation, okay, and this can be implemented. Yeah?
Why do we take a randomly chosen feasible solution? If we have a finite space,
Yeah.
solution space which we have,
Huh.
we can break it up into, as you said,
Yes.
15 different points and not randomly choose them, but separate them.
The reason why we have to choose randomly is we have no clue on the structure of the solution space.
Yeah, we don't know where the minima is. That's,
Yeah.
we don't know, therefore we say that we choose at a random place.
Yes.
But in probability, the point we are saying can 2 points can lie at very minimal distance, where the probability of finding the minimum would be very less.
Mm-hmm.
So here, why don't we include some finite distance spaces so that we know that at least, okay, when we are increasing it at some
Yeah, that's right. What you want is a sparse set. You want to have them at a reasonable distance so that simultaneously starting from them could give a better solution. The point is, the notion of neighborhood itself is not based on numerical estimates. It is based on properties. For example, if you consider a minimum spanning tree,
Is it a line that you're thinking, or is it a
no, it need not be a line or a curve. This curve is only to illustrate why okay, this is the curve of solution values. This is not the curve of this is not the structure of the solution space. Solution space is basically discrete. This is the curve of the value of the cost. That's all. That is where I explained to you where we are stuck with the local minimum and global minimum and so on. So the structure of the solution space being discrete, we do not have any clue on where if you start you would hit the overall minimum, right? So In fact, the notion of neighborhood in a discrete space is not based on numerical estimates, but by properties. For instance, if you take the set of all minimum spanning trees, how do you go from one minimum spanning tree to another, how do you go from one spanning tree to another spanning tree? What you do is, you fit in one edge, that will close an exactly one cycle, remove one edge, that will create a new spanning tree. So you have you have a tree, you close one edge and remove one edge, you get a neighboring spanning tree. Right? From one spanning tree to another spanning tree, this is the procedure to go. So the set of all having fixed one edge, so you can remove several of the edge, any of the edge in the cycle and get a neighboring one. Therefore, the neighbor of a spanning tree is defined as a spanning tree obtainable by fixing one edge and removing any one of the edges in the cycle. For example, that cycle has got 10 edges, you can remove any of the 9 other edges, any one of the 9 other edges and get 9 different spanning trees, and they all form some kind of a close neighborhood of this one. So you take the cost of fixing one edge and removing one of them and take the minimum of that, and that will give you the minimum neighbor. And if that minimum neighbor happens to lead to smaller, you go for that. Otherwise, you don't go for it, and so on. But now here you can see that the neighborhood itself is defined not based on any curve or something like that. Okay. Therefore, defining something, let me take one tree here or one tree there, too far away from that, is difficult to now define. That is the reason why what you do is you take 5 or 10 random spanning trees and make this process to work on each one of them independently. You can use concurrent processing for this, you can use parallel processing for it, you can have 5 different executions simultaneously running and then you can obtain the result. All these are possible in this scenario.
Can this be used in algorithm for, say, I have a what you call Slumberger, this is a project, so in Slumberger it's an engineering group that we would.
No, what is the problem?
The problem might be something like this, where you could you have oil fields over there, but they don't know where to actually dig one oil field.
Okay.
So therefore, actually, the probability of oil field is, as you said, it's a global space.
No, are they trying to optimize anything there?
I don't know if they can optimize anything over there.
No, these are all useful only in the context of optimization problem, where there are several solutions from which I want to choose the optimal solution. The whole process is to discover an optimal solution. So what I am trying to do is, I start with one solution and its cost may not be satisfactory for me, and I am looking for a cheaper solution in the neighborhood. If there is a cheaper solution, I go there and so on. I repeatedly do until I get stuck. In other words, I have now reached a local minima. When I have several local minima, hopefully I will have a global minima, and that is the idea behind multi-local search. But the point is, I have to listen to your problem a little more carefully and see whether there is anything that they are trying to optimize. I mean, in what manner they are deciding. I mean, what makes them to decide where to dig? Are they trying to minimize the pipe length, total pipe length going from that point, or are they trying to optimize anything? That we have to see. And once we know what is that they are trying to optimize, then we can come up with a local search which is suiting that particular flavor of the problem. This is a generic strategy. Okay. And what simulated annealing is doing is, even there are situations when you have multiple starting fails. Okay, even if the multiple starting fails, the multiple starting can fail in the following way. If the trough is very large like this and all your random points are within the same valley, all of them will converge to the same one, and which may not give you enough clue. That is the reason why it is not advisable. Even there are situations in which multiple local search doesn't pay off. So what you need is a strategy. Start from one, but go to various parts of the solution space, okay, and explore as much as possible, and then arrive at the minimum. And
can we, let's say another scenario, we have face recognition programs.
yes.
For face recognition programs, if we try to apply this algorithm, where you have a local, if there are 6 points to be matched,
Yes,
and you take another picture where another 6 space is there.
right.
So you go at a local minimum and find, okay, if this is matching or not, okay, if this is there or not. So if you find that point, okay, that is your 1 minima, 2 minimum. And if you say that you have hit 6 minima, that is the 6 points that are there. So how do we proceed in that? They are, like, because the space can be huge, but you have to actually find those 6 points and again place them at a different, with a different picture at those 6 points.
That's right. No, the face recognition is done typically in the following way. You always have the feature points which are very essential to recognize the faces.
Yeah.
There are characterizing points. Only when there is a match in the characterizing point, you first begin to even analyze, saying that maybe these two are the same. Then what you are looking for is that, okay, see what they do is they may take a nose tip and then eyebrow here and then chin points, etc. And then at that level, when they see the match, then they see whether in the neighborhood also there is a match. For example, at chin level there could be some match, but one fellow may be so young that there may be no wrinkles below his eyes, and for the other person there will be obviously several wrinkles that you have to eliminate him, but you should consider the other potential candidates a criminal or whatever it is. So what we need to do is, you can have multiple starting point. The local search will tell you whether further characteristics are satisfied or not. And if they are satisfied, you make a better guess, and it can only be done by iterated improvement. Okay?
So the function has to be yours.
Yes, it is problem dependent.
Yeah, it is problem.
It is. Okay, I just have to stop here. I am sorry to interrupt at this point. After lunch, we will continue this. Let this slide and everything be on here. We are going to see how simulated annealing is a very powerful technique which allows you to overcome the limitation of the local search, and then I proceed to other paradigms like divide and conquer, dynamic programming, etc. Okay, so I just stop at this point and we